I'm going to forever and always be a powder foundation girl. The reason is because if you go directly over your under eye or areas that you've applied a wet or hydrated product like concealer or foundation with a loose setting powder like this, what it's going to do is cling to all of those patches and lock in a not smooth area, because even though we are blended, we're not very smooth, right? So we have to smooth everything out before we lock it in. And you don't need a lot of powder. I just grab a little bit and start to set. That even on its own is gorgeous, but if you were going full glam and you wanted to bake, you could. I call this technique sandwiching my powders. I always just add foundation powder, then I add my loose baking powder, and then I use whatever is left on this brush from the foundation powder to dust it off. And that's how you get a lifted bright under eye, and it stays. Like at the end of the night, your under eyes are still locked in. Now, normally I would just leave it just like this for like a regular day, but we are going to do a glam look, so I want to lock in the under eye. And I also got a question in my DMs about what baking is, so let me explain what baking is. Baking is whenever you pack loose powder through here. It's sometimes colored, sometimes it's translucent, but overall it's going to absorb shine and oil. So whenever you pack it in kind of a dense, thick layer through here and you let it sit on the skin, the warmth from your skin starts to heat up and absorb some of that powder. And when that dryness meets that hydration and that moisture underneath, they come together and it locks it in place. So after a while, you go and dust off the excess, but that residual powder underneath is still left behind because it's been enmeshed into your foundation. Now that sounds really complicated and I don't mean for it to, so I'm going to demonstrate it in real time so you understand what I just said. Huda Beauty baking powder. This is in the color Cupcake, and it's not totally colorless. It has a little bit of a tint to it, and it has a little bit of a sheen to it, which is why I think it's one of the holy grail loose powders on the market. Now for the under eyes, I like to go in with a triangle powder puff because it's perfectly shaped to really maneuver through here. I just turn it over, tap it, flip it back over, and now you have some powder. Now you're going to dip your puff into this powder. Do not put this directly onto your face because you can see how it's uneven on the powder puff. That means it's going to be uneven on your face. So take it into your hand and warm it up. Now it's going to be a little bit more distributed. I'm going to dip again, warm it up again. Now we have a much more even coat of powder. And now I'm going to tap over the under eye and press in, look up so that you can get into all of the crevices underneath that lower lash line area. Gonna do the same here. If you have oily lids, take it across your eyelid as well. But just see how I'm inching it along and tapping and pressing? That's what you want. Grab more powder, tap it off on your hand. Now you see how when I pounce on there, it's a much more opaque white layer. This is baking. I'm gonna leave this on for just a few minutes. You can do your eye makeup, you can do your lips, you could do your brows, whatever you want during this time. But the longer this soaks in, the brighter and more matte your under eye is going to be. I'm gonna add a little bit more just for demonstration purposes. I normally do not do this much powder because I don't really like a super dry under eye, but I do like a bright under eye. So it's a delicate balance. Already visually, you can see how this would create a lift. When we dust this off, you're gonna notice that quite a bit of this is gonna be left behind, and it's gonna be like a little powder facelift. And these little powder puffs are from Amazon. They're kind of an old school beauty tool that had a recent resurgence, and it's because they have a nice velvety finish, so they blend product out onto the skin in a very soft focus way. You can tap a little bit of this powder onto the brow after you fill them in, and it'll help your brow product stay in place and not slip around. I'm also going to bake right underneath my jawline because I want to bring this area forward. I'm not going to leave this on as long because I don't want this to be super pronounced. I just want a light chisel here. Tap it through the chin. I'm going to take a powder brush with no product on it and dust off that bake, and you'll see that even in just those 2 seconds that it was sitting on the skin, it gripped and brightened. Like in such a short amount of time. You can only imagine what the under eye is going to look like. It's been a few minutes. It's time to dust this baking powder off. So we're going to take our powder brush and just start to flick this powder off. Now you'll see as I'm sweeping it away, there's powder that's stuck to the skin because it did exactly what I told you it would do. It's soaked in, it grabbed onto all of our liquids and creams underneath, and now that brightness isn't going anywhere. Look at that. So bright. That's why they call it baking, because the warmth of your body grabs onto that powder. And as your body warms up, it kind of drinks up the powder that's on top of it so that even when we dust it off, it's not going anywhere. And I would say I did like a medium bake. There's definitely like lighter versions of this, which is much more of an everyday look. And then there's really intense versions of this, which I think are beautiful. And it's just a little more glam. A lot of times makeup artists will do the eye makeup on top and leave that baking powder all through here. And then when they're done with the eye makeup look, they'll dust it off. And the reason is because that kind of stops any dark shadows from sticking to the face, and they just kind of get swept off with that powder. We'll do that in another look so you can actually see how that comes together. This is the completed look with the baking swept off. Our under eyes are locked in, they're bright, and they're not going anywhere.